This is the U.S. Report with James Morrow.
Good evening and welcome to the program. Here's what's coming up tonight. New Joe Biden tapes released, and who knows what's more shocking? His condition or the classified information he spilled the beans on. Plus, New York City's mayor is pledging cheap groceries for everyone. Except it's not. The taxpayer will be paying the bill. And Gavin Newsom's been a very naughty boy. His ex-lover reveals they were canoodling while she was also married to his close mate. Classy. But first, Tony. How did it all go so wrong? 1 minute you're bragging to your diary about shutting down the world and getting mooned over by celebrities. The next, you're having your godlike powers questioned by a bunch of ignorant goobers in the Senate who force you to take the Fifth Amendment not once, not twice, but 111 times.
Under the advice of my attorneys, I will invoke my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution to refrain from answering your questions. On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment.
Ah, yes, that is, of course, Tony Fauci, the pandemic czar, who is now the face of the absolute disaster that was COVID, who not only, in my opinion, likely worked to cover up the virus's likely origins from within, and I know, hold on to your hats here, from within a biowarfare lab where they were experimenting with coronaviruses, but also was responsible, alongside our elected leaders, for the greatest abuse of government power in any of our lifetimes. Lockdowns, the destruction of a generation's schooling, and a debt hangover that we may never recover from. It was nothing short of institutionalized expert-class idiocy. I mean, remember this?
She must wear a mask to play, and so too must her saxophone.
The city of San Clemente made the move to discourage skaters.
A paddleboarder is chased down by law enforcement for being out on the water.
Urging Californians to wear masks in between bites at restaurants.
Where students walked as robots.
Inspired to make their own hugging curtain.
Two young star-crossed lovers professing their love from a second-story window.
And what good does it do?
They look like ducks or something. And we laugh, but it's probably really working partially.
I don't know.
And I mean, it seems almost silly now, but let's remember that there was a fair bit of cruelty thrown in, too.
Put your mask on. Put your mask on. No, you gotta wear it on, honey.
No, you gotta keep it on.
Yes, that was all thanks to Dr. Anthony Fauci, who, at the height of the pandemic, declared, "I represent science."
Criticize science, nobody's going to know what they're talking about. But if they get up and really aim their bullets at Tony Fauci, well, people could recognize there's a person there, so it's easy to criticize. But they're really criticizing science, because I represent science.
Turns out he left out a word, junk, as in junk science. This week, the world has finally seen what many of us had long suspected, that Fauci's prosecution of the fight against COVID was a lot less about keeping people safe and a lot more about his inflating his own ego, growing his bank balance, and hiding what he knew about the origins of COVID. This week's testimony before the Senate came on the heels of the release of the Fauci Diaries, more than 1,000 pages of his own Dear Diary reflections through the pandemic, composed on a government computer and thus fair game for investigators. Among the revelations in the diaries there was that as early as January 2020, Fauci knew that the so-called wet market that everybody talked about was not the source of the virus. despite insisting that those who thought otherwise were conspiracy theorists. He also said that he was absolutely obsessed with celebrity attention. He was cooing, among other things, when Bono called him a global hero, and when Julia Roberts had to have a drink of water, but she was so excited when she saw his face on a screen when they were doing an interview. And he said that he knew COVID was not as deadly as he said it was publicly, even comparing it to seasonal flu. Wow. We've also learned tons about other interesting facts, like the fact that Fauci lobbied friends and associates to put him up for awards that came with cash prizes amounting to more than $1 million. Those who successfully nominated Fauci were, of course, rewarded with grants from his own agency because, well, hey, science, right? All this is something of a vindication for those like me who spent the pandemic being called cookers and conspiracy theorists who were happy to see Grandma die so they could go to the pub. Well, it turns out everyone who looked at the numbers as well as pre-existing pandemic plans and said, nope, what we're doing here, this is ridiculous. Turns out we were right. Turns out masks were unnecessary, lockdowns were an atrocious abuse of state power, and that shutting down the school system for at-home learning, yeah, sure, was indeed government-sanctioned child abuse. And that's before we get to the vaccines, and let's just say they were oversold. The only good news is the door is now open for accountability. President Joe Biden, or at least Joe Biden's autopen, may have issued Fauci with a blanket pardon just before he left office, covering any federal crime committed over the previous decade, a period that goes well back beyond COVID's official start. Because of that, in a funny legal quirk dating back to an 1896 Supreme Court decision, the law of the land in the U.S. has been that federal pardons strip one's right to refuse to testify or self-incriminate before Congress, as Fauci attempted to do. And Fauci is now also facing the prospect of state prosecution in Florida, where the local attorney general has just opened up his own investigation into Fauci and COVID. And of course, federal pardons do not cover state crimes. Now, Fauci may be many things: vain, greedy, narcissistic, and in mourning for the days when he was a hero whose image graced action figures and even votive candles. Yes, I'm being serious. But while he may have turned out to be a pretty poor doctor and an even worse character, Fauci is no dummy. So in taking the fifth and refusing to answer questions before the Senate, despite, as I say, not legally being entitled to do so, I think Fauci was pretty clearly making a calculation. Namely, that coming clean and telling the truth about COVID, its origins, his role in covering up where it came from, and what he did to spread fear and panic and utterly unnecessary lockdowns across America, and, by the way, by extension, across the world, including here in Australia, well, telling the truth about that would be far worse for him, even reputationally, than the risk of that contempt citation. Now, I know most people don't like to think about COVID these days when there are other things to worry about. It was the same thing after the Spanish flu pandemic a century ago, though in that case the carnage was in fact entirely of natural origin. When that was over, nobody wanted to talk about it or read books about it. They just wanted to get on with the roaring 20s. But this time, we must talk about it. Because what happened during COVID was not just an incredible abuse of science by authorities who acted to silence debate when they should have encouraged it. It also created so much of the cynicism we see today about not just science, but politics and authority. Some measure of accountability would go a long way towards turning that around, even if it would do nothing for those who lost years of education, their businesses, and their chances to be with their loved ones in their last days. Okay, let's get straight into it with our first guest political journalist, John Fund. John, welcome back to the program. Great to have you here. Gotta talk more about all of this Fauci business that came out this week. And please Promise me you are not going to plead the fifth when I ask you this question. You were on to the Fauci COVID cover-up scam way back in 2023 with your Unleash Prosperity newsletter. Tell us about what you had found about this conspiracy to hide the origins of the COVID virus.
Well, all of this happened right after the COVID virus hit. Because a lot of scientists and government bureaucrats realized they had a lot to hide for and answer for what happened with China's Wuhan laboratory. And in order to cover that up, and also because they wanted to seize control of the American economy, I believe, they basically engaged in a systematic campaign of intimidation, censorship, and bullying of anyone who would criticize them. And a major person behind this was Anthony Fauci, who was the most visible public health official fighting COVID.
And in 2023, you found that already people were talking about how there was this move to silence it, and it was because one of the main theories is that, in fact, some of that work at the Wuhan virus laboratory was actually being paid for by American scientists who had been trying to evade restrictions on the gain of function research, that is, playing with the coronaviruses to make them more transmittable, more dangerous to humans, make them jump species.
And the circumstantial evidence is that COVID did originate in that low security Chinese lab, and it somehow escaped. And we, the United States, government taxpayer money, may have been the proximate cause of that. It is probably the biggest disaster that any government has ever perpetrated on its own citizens in decades. Now, obviously, the Chinese are responsible, but who knows if the Chinese would have conducted the research without these government grants, which Anthony Fauci knew of and approved of.
And it's just so wild to me because all during that period of time, you know, anybody who spoke about this being the likely source of the virus, I mean, you know, you've got a market down the road and you've got an actual virus laboratory where they play with these things, and people say, oh, no, it's got to be the market. Don't pay attention to the lab. You know, and you're called a conspiracy theorist. How are we supposed to get any trust back in American science and, you know, particularly official science, which you want to be reliable and non-political?
Well, we certainly don't want to listen to Anthony Fauci, who answered all of his critics at the time and since then by saying, I represent science. You can't challenge me. Well, we all know that Anthony Fauci was representing his own interests and covering up for his mistakes. So what do we do going forward? Well, the first rule, and of course this applies in Australia because you have even more pressures than we do, is we must maintain free speech. We must allow people to comment, to criticize, to analyze. And the last thing we want is to trust government authority without scrutiny.
And John, I want to talk about specifically that dramatic hearing that took place 2 days ago where Fauci took the Fifth Amendment 111 times, even though under the terms of the pardon, he no longer can avoid incriminating himself because there's nothing to incriminate himself for. What was the calculation there? Do you think that Fauci said, well, I don't want to set myself a perjury trap by lying to these people, or I don't want to look bad because of just how bad the truthful answers would be?
I think the latter more than the former. I think that Anthony Fauci could have simply had a memory loss. I don't recall. You know, I'm 85 years old. So he could have pulled a Joe Biden. But he chose not to do that because he clearly is too proud and arrogant a figure to pretend that he is a doddering old fool. So his response was, well, I'm going to take the Fifth Amendment because I can't possibly explain that my defense is, oh, I lied to my diary. That's basically what his defense would have had to have been.
Yeah, and I mean, and you know, all of the things that were in the diary, you know, right away, early on, he was saying, look, this is more like a flu in terms of mortality. And yet, you know, they're going out and saying, hey, telling everybody to shut down the schools and shut down the bars and shut down the restaurants and shut down the economy. There were a lot of crazy moments. There was the moment when he refused to answer what color tie he was, and he took the fifth. But there was also this moment when Fauci was asked about his own attorney who'd been chucked out of the room for misbehaving in the hearing. But have a look at this little exchange.
Well, let me tell you who David Schertler is for the audience, because he was ejected by the chairman. He's a high-profile criminal attorney. And there's an article here in the Washington Free Beacon that talks about why you would hire a guy like David Schertler. And the comment is, if you're in deep, that's who you call. Do you feel like you're in deep?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah, look, John, I mean, you know, if he was going to answer that question, honestly, I suspect the answer would have been possibly fairly deep.
Look, we cannot forget that Anthony Fauci is not alone here. We should not focus it just on him. His own chief of staff is under federal indictment for concealing public records from legitimate requests from the media. Those are felony charges. Lots of other people that Anthony Fauci was corresponding with and assembling in meetings were part of this cover-up and part of this campaign of intimidation against any critics who dared to challenge these lockdowns. So this is a systemic problem. Now, I do believe that the government is cleaning house. Jay Bhattacharya, who was one of the leading critics of Anthony Fauci, is now head of the National Institutes of Health. That's progress. But what we really have to do is, I think, challenge the very scientific industrial complex we have created in this country. You know, remember that Dwight Eisenhower warned us about a military industrial complex when he left the presidency in 1961, but he also warned about an educational industrial complex. And we have increasingly seen science funding controlled by the federal government, and has become a cesspool of corruption and favoritism and patronage. In fact, a lot of what Fauci was doing was he would recommend people for grants from the National Institutes of Health in exchange for their recommending him for cash prizes from foundations and other private sector entities, including one for over $1 million. He was getting rich off of government contracts. This was long before COVID even.
And in fact, actually, those people would then get rewarded with grants from Fauci's own agency. It's a complete scandal. And yes, I'm glad you mentioned Jay Bhattacharya. He is fantastic. We had him on many times at the start of the pandemic here on News24, and we're very glad to see him in his new position. But just finally, you know, on a lighter note, and I take your point that we need to not just look at Fauci, but I did enjoy the fact that Trump posted this on his social media just before Fauci testimony. It's footage of the Fauci throwing out the first pitch at a Washington Nationals game. And whatever you think of Trump, it was a great way to illustrate what a clown this guy was. Yeah, not a great throw there.
Please note that in this footage, if you look at it from Fauci's point of view, he was, of course, pitching to the left.
Very well observed, John Fund. That's why we love having you here on the U.S. Report. Always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's go from the past to the present here, and specifically Michigan and the Michigan Senate primary, where Abdul El-Sayed, a hard-left progressive who rejects the Democratic Socialist label but is still really hard-left, is trouncing challenger Haley Stevens in the polls. Now, it's getting very punchy with El-Sayed facing charges of sexism and anti-Semitism and concerns that he won't release his tax returns, while Haley Stevens, well, she's been accused of talking up her Michigan accent to sound more authentic, as this side-by-side clip reveals.
Oversight, intelligence, judiciary are going to be taking up those matters through hearings and different investigations.
I sound like the people who I talk to in Michigan who are getting screwed right now by Donald Trump, okay? And I'm telling you, I'm at the fish fry in Detroit. It's a joyous day. And the gals, 2 minutes into the conversation, what are we going to do about our utility bill?
Gol darn it, she's at the fish fry. Well, joining me now to discuss this and more is our good friend, former Chief of Staff to Donald Trump, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, welcome to the program here. Mick, I've been fascinated by this Michigan primary here, and one of the things that strikes me about this one is how in the polls, they show that young people are breaking heavily for the anti-Israel, hard-left progressive candidate. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this because, yes, it's one state, but it seems like this is a bit of a microcosm for what the Democrats are going through more broadly.
Yeah. Hey, James, it's great to see you. Bringing up my Southern accent for this part of the show. No, I'm sorry. Look, Michigan is fascinating to me. It really is, just for a variety of reasons. It is a true purple state. It is a swing state. There is no incumbent in Michigan, so we're getting these. The power of the incumbency in our system is sometimes overwhelming, but that doesn't play here in Michigan. So you have sort of a blank slate. And yes, the progressive socialist Democrat is doing extraordinarily well, as you say, especially with voters under 60. Whether or not that translates into broader support nationwide remains to be seen. Whether or not it even propels al-Sayed to a primary election and ultimately a general election, we're a long way from knowing the answer to that. But clearly, right now, the energy in the Democrat Party is with this socialist wing.
And where does this then, the Democrat establishment, where are they going with this? Because we're getting into this situation where they're going to have to start thinking about their presidential candidate. And I wanted to ask about this, too, because there's this question of who's it going to be. And they're in a real pickle. You've got Gavin Newsom, but he's sinking in the polls. Kamala Harris is horrifying, I think, an awful lot of Democrats. But I'm also hearing some chatter about Mark Kelly, the former astronaut, confirmed Trump hater. He's an Arizona senator. He's earned himself a puff piece this week in The Atlantic where these sorts of trial balloons are floated. And Spencer Pratt posted an enigmatic tweet the other day saying that if you want to know who the Democrats' real pick was, look to the stars, which may be a reference to the astronaut thing. What do you reckon? Is this a new name we should be thinking about as the Dems deal with this dilemma?
How many times you and I talked about this, James? We don't know all of the names yet that are going to be close to this election. There'll be 10 or 12, maybe 15 Democrats, the same number of Republicans. Could Kelly run? Sure. Would he be a compelling candidate? Maybe. I have no idea. I'm not sure where his base is in the Democrat Party. Again, if the energy, as we just talked about in Michigan, is with the progressive far socialist left, then my mind immediately goes to somebody like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as running for president, or perhaps Zohran Mamdani from the mayor of New York running for president. None of these things are really off the table. It is ripping the Democrat Party apart. And yeah, I know it gets a lot of attention between the mainstream of the party and the far left wing, but let's cut through all that noise and get down to where this country runs when it comes to politics, and that's money. And the Democrats are having a difficult time now raising money because the Democrat donors are concerned that they might be giving money to a socialist party, and that's a real good reason to not whip out the checkbook. And the Dems are having a lot of trouble right now raising the cash necessary to go into these midterm elections.
Well, Mick, there was a story the other day that apparently they've had to basically mortgage the building that the Democrat headquarters are in. Tell us a little bit more about the money problems that they're having. And, you know, is the Democrat socialist, in a sense, Donald Trump and the Republicans' best friend here?
On a bunch of different levels, that may be the case. Keep in mind, there's a very interesting story coming out of Michigan that the sitting Democrat attorney general said she wasn't comfortable going to a Democrat Party meeting in her home state. Why? Because she's Jewish. That's a big deal right now in the Democrat Party. It's a big deal in the country, and it should be. The anti-Semitism that is bubbling up within the Democrats is having a major impact on the unity in the party and in the giving. Let's just be honest with each other. A lot of the big Jewish donors right now in the Democrat Party are not writing the big checks because they're not sure the Democrat Party isn't anti-Semitic right now. That's something the Democrats have to deal with. Yes, right now, look, Donald Trump's approval ratings are at all-time lows. Republicans are struggling in a bunch of different races. But right now, the reason that this midterm race looks to be as tight as it is that the Democrats are in complete disarray.
And, you know, I tell you what, Mick, if growing up in New York City, you told me that at this age, my age now, I'd be seeing a Democrat Party where Jewish donors were running from it and thinking it was anti-Semitic, I could never have conceived that. I would have thought you were on drugs. But, hey, finally, I want to talk, Mick, just about some of these newly released audio tapes of Joe Biden talking with his biographer, having some memory lapses during the interviews. It's about 3 hours of audio and 117 pages of transcripts, but here's just a little bit of a snippet here.
I'm in Munich, but after Angela Merkel president's working lunch with, hang on a second. It's confusing me. I was going to ask you something else. Oh gosh. I can't think what it is.
And Mick, I mean, in some of the other tapes, he says, oh, yeah, and here's a classified document and things like this. What's sort of worse here, that Joe Biden was clearly having real trouble struggling and everybody hid it, or that he was also sharing out classified information, which, you know, when Trump allegedly did that, everybody made a huge deal about it.
Well, and it looks like John Bolton may go to jail for doing the exact same thing. But the most interesting part to me of that clip, and there's a bunch of them, but when you put that up, it was the date. That was 2017. That's 4 years before he takes office and 8 years before he leaves office, or 7. That's stunning to me that he was in that condition back in 2017. So look, we all have bad days. I have bad days. I can't remember stuff all the time. I forget my kids' names every now and then. It happens to all of us. But when it happens to you in your late 70s, you have to wonder if it's a sign of something more. And then you really have to wonder if you're capable of being president of the United States. Look, these tapes, look, the Democrats want them to go away. They do. They want to stop talking about Joe Biden. But I think it's incumbent upon them as we go through these tapes to figure out what exactly the Democrats were thinking when they said, this is the guy we need to run the country, because I think that's still a relevant talking point, or discussion point, at least in this country.
Yeah, well, I mean, if the same decision makers are in place now as back then, yeah, it's a big issue. Mick Mulvaney, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much. Now, don't go away, because we got plenty more coming after the break. But first, just a little bit more from that bonkers COVID era that we're all recalling this week, now that Anthony Fauci's lies have been exposed for all to see. I mean, yeah, things were weird back then, but I'd forgotten that they were, well, this weird. Remember this?
Dr. Fauci, give us vaccines. Help all the people who have been quarantined. We'll wear our masks and we'll have to stay distant. We'll wash our hands and we'll be more resistant. Fauci, yes? Promise us, please. We'll have a cure that can fight off this disease. Restrictions will lift with some ease. Dr. Fauci, don't forget me.
I can't even believe that happened, but that was real. This is what happens when you let the theater kids shut down the world. Anyway, stick around. Lots more after the break. Welcome back to the program. Now, this week was the funeral of former Senator Lindsey Graham. Despite being a once rival of Donald Trump, of course, the president was amongst those giving touching and heartfelt eulogies. Have a look at Trump talking about Graham's hard upbringing.
When Lindsey was just 20 years old, he lost his mom to cancer. 15 months later, he lost his dad. Their deaths left his 13-year-old sister, Darlene, an orphan. But in God's mercy, she had her wonderful brother to take care of her. On top of it all, Lindsey became her guardian while still in college and helped raise her.
Quite an amazing story, that. And there were also cameras on Ukraine's leader, Vladimir Zelensky, and Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu. Everyone left to guess what they could have been discussing. Who knows? Anyway, let's bring in the California Post deputy editor-in-chief, Barclay Crawford. Barclay, welcome to the program. What did you make of the whole funeral? It was quite a political show there.
It really was, and I guess that really reflects just what a titan Lindsey Graham was. You know, like, he was a big figure in Washington. He was respected on both sides of the floor. I mean, his relationship with Trump's also fascinating, isn't it? I mean, they were such rivals, you know. And in 2016, Trump went as far as to famously or infamously put out his cell phone number to basically the millions of Americans. They went from there to the stage where Graham was regarded around DC as very much the Trump whisperer. And you know, there's been a lot of talk about just how how they'll go with dealing with the president now that Lindsay's not there anymore. So, yeah, it was a big moment. I thought Trump was very good. His eulogy was very good.
It was a real moment. And one of the things that struck me, and just listening to some of the tributes to Graham, and also just people talking about how he worked with people, it struck me that this is the end of an era of a sort of politics where you can be friends with somebody, not necessarily in your faction or your party, fight against them on the issues that are important to you, but also when your causes intersect, still be able to get business done. That seemed to be the key to what made him really effective, and I feel like there's almost lessons that a lot of us could take, in other parts of our lives from that.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I mean, I think it's almost like it's a place that we want to get back to. I mean, he was bigger than just politics too, as we know. He was definitely a statesman. I mean, he died just shortly after returning from the Ukraine. So, I mean, he was a big figure there, and one that will be deeply missed.
Yeah, indeed. Hey, on to more sort of, we've spoken about the sacred, and now I guess we have to talk about the profane. And in California, where you are, a former aide of Governor Gavin Newsom has written and revealed a lot more details about an affair she and him had that was already public, but she's written in Vanity Fair Ruby Rippey that there was a clear power dynamic in favor of Newsom. Well, obviously, he was the governor, that this was a booze-fueled affair, and that while Newsom always tried to minimize what happened between them, it turns out that this was, and not really clear to people, a full-blown 10-month affair with the wife of his own deputy chief of staff, who was also serving as his diary secretary. I think people concede that politicians and monogamy don't always go together, but this seems a bit extreme even for Gavin Newsom. Will this tarnish his image ahead of the 2028 presidential run?
Yeah, James, it's not just his the wife of an aide, but the wife of a very close friend. And I think that was the issue here as well, that sort of has been a bit, that Newsom was quick to gloss over, saying, in his own memoir, he very much dismissed it, which is the reason why she's come forward. She's actually come forward because she felt that Newsom didn't give her the time they spent together and the implications for her, the respect it deserved. I mean, she ended up relapsing into alcoholism after this. I mean, it was, as you said, it was a significant affair, long running. It was very much a sexual affair, but it was an affair. I mean, whether it affects him running for president, it's hard to see, but it does talk to his character, doesn't it? Maybe to the doubts people have about Gavin Newsom, about whether he is a chameleon, whether he is a bit amoral, whether he's able to move between boundaries quickly enough. I mean, that would be where it would go to in 2026, I think. Very much so. So whether it hurts him or not, we're yet to see. But it definitely, to many people, will speak to his character and the doubts they have over that.
Well, one of the interesting things this week has been, of course, with all of this stuff coming up, about Fauci and the revisiting of that whole COVID era, that we've seen people revisiting all the footage of Gavin Newsom going and having basically, dinners at restaurants and stuff that everybody else wasn't allowed to have. It seems to me that there's a real slipperiness to Gavin Newsom that I think people are starting to catch on to.
Yeah, definitely. The French laundry scandal was a big deal at the time. I mean, you just look at Gavin Newsom, the way he came out and said that he's been violently opposed to a billionaire's tax in the state of California. But then he comes out and says, but wait, I support a billionaire's tax for the entire US. So which is it, Gavin? I mean, he wants to appeal to the rising far left of his party, but then at home he's saying he doesn't need one. I mean, I don't know. This really talks to his character. Just the fact that does he have any firm beliefs? Does he actually believe anything? And to your point earlier about Lindsey Graham, I think people are sick of politicians that don't really stand for anything beyond their own personal success.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's correct. I think that may also sort of explain some of what's happening on the Democratic far left at the moment. But, just another aspect, of course, that hurts Newsom is California, the state of California itself. And your own brilliant California Post newspaper has done some great journalism this week, hitting the streets of L.A. and the famous Skid Row, which has a huge homeless problem, and has found some shocking findings, among other things, that instead of directing addicts to get clean, a taxpayer-funded program is now doling out free paraphernalia enabling addicts to get high, no questions asked. This is just unbelievable to me. Tell us more about this. It does seem to go to this idea that there's a homeless industrial complex down there that is not about helping people get better, but about, collecting money.
Very much the case, James. Very much the case. I mean, California has a homeless industrial complex. That there is no doubt about that. This is going on every day. I mean, we've done similar examples. This one's in Skid Row. I mean, the fact that Skid Row's there and it's entrenched as a part of Los Angeles and has been since the 70s speaks to this. The fact that Skid Row in 2026 isn't getting smaller, it's getting bigger. They just released new figures showing it's growing. I mean, there's 5,000 people living homeless in Skid Row. It's extraordinary. Yes, they have free meth pipes, free syringes handed out. I mean, not just there, but in parks, MacArthur Park, just in downtown LA. There's notoriously a Land Cruiser that cruises around handing out meth pipes and syringes and stuff to people, to addicts, to keep fueling the problem. It's a real issue here, and one that won't go away and has not gone away. The figures prove that. So, I mean, it's almost like America just doesn't do socialism well. It's not meant to do socialism, and it should be a warning for the Democrats as they move further to the left. But it's also a warning to the people of America about the kind of policies that Newsom has been fine with. I mean, he himself has poured about $2.7 billion into homelessness in Los Angeles, to the stage where they refurb a hotel so that homeless live in there, but at the cost of $1 million per room, more than most people can afford to buy their own house. So it's really a real failing, homelessness in California.
Yeah, it is unbelievable to me, and it strikes me that a lot of people are doing better off the homelessness crisis, except the homeless. Thank you so much, Barclay Crawford, for joining me. Now we're going to take a short break, but first let's go over to Chicago, where they've been showing how innovative they are. And to fight crime on the transit system, well, I watched this and I thought, hey, why hasn't anybody come up with this before?
We are putting up these signs as an indication of what the consequences will be of any criminal actions on the CTA. We are hoping to deter crime and to encourage people to come forward if they are witnesses of crime.
These signs are a message to all of our riders and employees that we are working together with the County State's Attorney's Office to take action and ensure and promote a safe ride on the CTA.
Signs! Why didn't anybody think of it before? Signs, signs, signs. Put them everywhere. No more murders, no more muggings. Get those girl bosses a Nobel Prize. Now, stick around because we're going to have New York City madness after the break. Welcome back to the program. Well, in New York City, Mayor Zohran Mamdani, this is such a great idea. I can't even believe he's trying this. He is pitching a discount of 30% below retail prices on a core basket of goods at new city-owned grocery stores. I can't imagine what could go wrong here. Have a look.
Once a month, our 5 city-run grocery stores will set prices for this core set of goods at 30% below typical retail prices. No exceptions, no gimmicks. The savings will last for the entire month. That means no weekly fluctuations nor sticker shock at the checkout line.
Yes, government-run grocery stores. I can't imagine what could be wrong with that. It's prompted some very obvious questions about how the city should even be doing this. Let's bring in our final guest for the evening, former Republican nominee for the U.S. Senate, coming to us from New Jersey, Rick Maida. Rick, welcome back to the program. Great to see you. I am so fascinated by this whole thing here. I can only think of like a million problems with it, including the fact that there's already food assistance and food stamps for people to get groceries, what this might do to small grocery stores, whether people from New Jersey will be coming across and allowed to come across to get groceries at 30% off. Walk us through this, and is he serious?
Well, first of all, great to be back on. Let's do this. Let's coin a new term today. Momdonomics. I mean, we keep hearing it over and over and over again. It's just communism in a grocery cart. fake discounts, real taxes, unfair competition, and taxpayers paying twice. This is not affordability, it's communist theater. I mean, does he really think politicians understand supply chain, inventory, waste staffing, and customers? And the problem is he's not lowering the bill. He's just hiding the bill. The costs are going to be fed back to the taxpayers. And so many people are moving out. He's committed $70 million to a 5-store plan. I mean, where is the actual savings and discounts coming from? And this is, look, we've tried this before. I mean, Kansas City nearly poured $18 million, struggled with losses, empty shelves, and then failed. So these bodegas, these supermarkets, these diverse little grocery stores all throughout the city, they're already on razor thin margins. They're not going to be able to compete. Soviet economics in a green reusable tote bag.
Well, I don't know. Maybe if I was a bodega owner, I'd just be going and buying all of my supplies, you know, from the Mamdani grocery store and then putting them on the shelves with maybe a 15% markup and seeing how that goes. But, you know, anyway, there's so much else going on in New York City. Families of 9/11 victims, I was shocked by this, but Zohran Mamdani, they've asked for Zohran Mamdani to be banned from the 25th anniversary of the attacks at Ground Zero, branding him an apologist for Islamic terror, whose presence, they say, would be an insult to the memories of nearly 3,000 people murdered on that dark day. Well, you know, when you think about what they're doing, what he's talking about, and some of his friends, I kind of think they've got a point.
Yeah, look, this one is personal. I mean, Ground Zero is sacred ground. It's not Mamdani's political stage. I got to be honest with you. I lived across the river. I saw the smoke billow from the towers. I lost friends. You know, Mamdani does not get to lecture us about what that day means when he won't even condemn globalize the Intifada, a slogan associated with terrorism and violence. They don't want him there because Ground Zero is sacred. It's not a stage for politicians that have absolutely no sympathy, forget empathy, no sympathy towards extremists. You know, at the end of the day, this, you know, the Twin Towers, that was murder. That was full terrorism and murder. You should have the decency to stay away when you don't even condemn those that were responsible for it. It's sickening.
It is sickening, especially when you consider, Rick, that you know, Zohran Mamdani pals around with people like Hassan Piker, who have said that not only, you know, were they justified, but that America deserved 9/11. I just think the left has gotten so far out on the anti-American stream here. I want to get your thoughts on this story that a new history of communism class is going to be required to be taught in Florida schools from next month. I think this is great. The Florida Board of Education has approved the curriculum, and I think it's about time that young people were taught that 100 million people died in the last century because of this evil ideology. But enough about me. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I think the quote stands. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. We got to teach the history of communism now. In fact, maybe they can save a seat for Zohran Mamdani. Honestly, you know, when you repackage failed ideas to other generations, what's happening is that they're forgetting because it's not viscerally available to them to see how terrible these are. Now you have people, you know, immigrating from Cuba, you know, former Soviet Union. They've seen these failed systems produce oppression, poverty, and fear. They've lived through it. And so many of the people that are pushing for these communist ideologies have never lived through the realities of what communism brings. And so it's a very good idea. The only antidote to communist propaganda is historical truth. And I think young people need the facts about the millions and millions who suffered under these regimes.
Yeah, absolutely, and that it is not the way of the future. It's just, why do we have to keep making the same mistakes over and over again? Hey, finally, just a shocking story out of university land where taxpayer-funded My Gender dolls, and these have, well, removable, swappable genitals, apparently. They're coming to Minnesota, Tim Walz's state, for kids as young as 4, and they're apparently designed so that gender-diverse preschoolers, you heard that right, can play with the different parts and realize their options. Have a look at this.
The My Gender dolls also include genitals. This is important because kids can learn that all gender identities and gender expressions are valid, no matter how your body looks. There are lots of different ways to be a girl, a boy, or anywhere along a gender spectrum.
Rick, I don't know what to say about this, but what business do adults have getting kids to think about these things in this way? It seems horrifying.
Oh, man. As a father, this one makes me nauseous. I mean, this is not education. It's taxpayer-funded predatory sexualization of preschool children. I mean, let's call it what it is. I mean, 4-year-olds do not need adults teaching them to swap genital body parts or explore options. I mean, at 4 years old, hey, what happened to Cabbage Patch Kids? I mean, honestly, where did we go so wrong? And this is ideological grooming, plain and simple. Creating confusion. Is this simply like the mental health industry driving more kids to therapy? I mean, these are intimate conversations that belong with parents and families, not bureaucrats and school officials. I mean, we really need to protect children, respect parents, and keep the sexualized nonsense and radical gender ideology out of our preschool classrooms. And 4 years old, really?
It's just unbelievable. Let kids be kids, for God's sake. You're absolutely right, Rick Maida. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me. Now, stick around. Don't go away. We're going to take a short break. But first, it's unbelievable to remember that once upon a time, Anthony Fauci was such a hero that he was lionized with his own action figure. But now, well, get your orders in early for Christmas because there's been an update.
I decline to answer that question.
Yay!
Yep, have fun, kids. Only in America after the break. You're not going to want to miss this one. Welcome back to the program, and now it's time for that little segment we like to call Only in America.
Only in America.
Well, we all know about the Fauci diaries, and now thanks to our friends at Town Hall Media, we know what it looked like when they were written. Or do we? And keep in mind as you watch this clip, these are all direct quotes from the diary that was released by Rand Paul.
February 8th, 2020. This is acting like a bad influenza. The case fatality rate is more like 0.2 to 0.3% rather than 2%. I spoke with New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio and convinced him, based on what I was saying publicly in my conversation tonight, to close the New York City schools.
I got vaccinated.
I had a similar call with Ann O'Leary, the Chief of Staff of Governor Gavin Newsom of California. Ann said that based on my TV appearances today and yesterday, the governor has decided to close the schools in California, as well as the bars and restaurants.
I apologized. We had dinner, 4 o'clock dinner in an orange-tiered county.
October 23rd, 2020. Had dinner at my home with Jake and Jennifer Tapper. Relaxed, good time. Jake clearly believes that Trump is totally nuts.
Dear Diary, Anthony Fauci, you are a fraud and a joke. That's it for this week. See you next time, and I'll see you Sunday morning for Outsiders. Bye-bye.